everybody. I'm Andrea Westfall, and as Chris said, I'm the Sustainable Procurement Coordinator at the City of Mississauga. And I'm going to talk today about how we approach sustainable procurement at the city, particularly where it comes to increasing our circularity. We've had a sustainable procurement policy in place since 2018, and focus on circular approaches has been increasing year over year since then. Next slide, please. There are two main areas where we focus on becoming more circular. The first being new procurements, where we have the opportunity to integrate it into the bid documents. And the second being what we do with the existing assets at end of life. Next slide, please. To focus first on what we can do with new procurements, it's important to understand that circular procurement is a newer concept to many within the broader public sector. Being publicly funded, government agencies are tasked with achieving best value. And as it's been said before, for years, best value has been defined primarily by lowest price. Environmental impact, total cost of ownership, and social value were rarely at the forefront when it came to us making buying decisions. With thinking shifting more towards securing a stable and prosperous future, many are starting to realize that best value means much more than today's lowest price, because low prices often come with hidden environmental and social costs that far exceed the dollars that we save. When we think about best value, we take into consideration things like modularity. Is this a product that can be disassembled and moved if our needs change, which saves us from creating waste and having to make a second purchase? Could we upgrade the product over time, or will it become quickly obsolete, forcing us to go back to market sooner than we'd like? How easily can the item be repaired? Is it designed for easy access to parts so that our maintenance invoice costs are kept low? Are parts only available from one source that has a costly monopoly, increasing our total cost of ownership? Or at worst, once it breaks, likely unexpectedly, do we have no choice but to throw it away and buy a new one? How durable is the item? Would buying a higher quality actually save us more money in the long run by reducing the number of repairs and how many times we have to pay to have a buyer prepare a bid request? And finally, can it be reused in whole or in part by your organization or as a donated item, or are we just going to have to pay for that disposal? Next slide, please. You may be asking some of these questions in your current procurement process, but some might also be new. Starting to purchase in a circular way means starting to think about these new questions and also understanding the business case for why it's important to ask them. I could go into a business unit and talk to them about how circular procurement connects to our climate change action plan, or it aligns with our strategic plan, or supports our green pillar. But what happens when the thorny question of budget comes up? When we went through the list of things just now that redefine best value, we were able to connect each of them to cost avoidance, time savings, or cost savings, in addition to waste reduction. The reality is that it costs us time and money to go to market. We often forget this. The more often we have to repeat a procurement because a cheaply made item fails, the higher the cost becomes and waste generation increases. Doing a total cost of ownership analysis may be time consuming and confusing at the start, but the dollar value savings cannot be disputed. Take, for example, the city's procurement of ice resurfacers. The brand name is Zambonis. Just looking at those bids, the lowest cost was a gas diesel model. But when we crunched the numbers, if we went with the electric option with lower fuel and maintenance requirements, we would save $1.7 million over the life of the resurfacer. Circular procurement may be a radical rethinking of best value where we think about end of life at the start of the purchase, but it makes both fiscal and environmental sense. Next slide, please. Once we know what we want, we turn to drafting our bid documents. Market research and past procurements can give you an idea of whether or not you can make a 10-year life cycle or easy disassembly for recycling mandatory, or if you should state that it's preferred. Preference allows us to communicate the question with the market what we really want, but it doesn't unduly limit competition. You could also include a question if you just want to gather the information. Not every supplier is going to produce an Energy Star product, for example, but maybe most of them do. You can keep your responses on file to consult the next time you have to go to market. Together, we have tremendous buying power. If we all start asking questions about recycled content or stating that we prefer it, suppliers will see the value in incorporating it. And if it's not something they already do, they might start doing it. So then hopefully we're looking at a market where it can be a mandatory requirement and it won't limit competition. We can also encourage extended producer responsibility by including things like buyback clauses. This is especially effective in markets where suppliers are eager to reclaim rare elements or parts in good condition. Again, it forces the supplier to think about how they're going to handle end of life, brings value through cost savings, and saves you time. You might also want to think about the product as a service model that Francis has discussed. Even asking a supplier, would I be able to rent this or lease this, communicates to them that it's something that they might want to consider offering. Next slide. Here are some recent examples of where we were able to incorporate circularity into our procurements at the city. Last year, instead of purchasing fixed sheltered bicycle parking, we went to market for a modular version. We specified that the proposed shelters are to be mainly comprised of aluminum and glass and be of modular nature to be dismantled and reused at another location should the need arise. This builds in flexibility for a structure that would otherwise have been fixed in place and increases our ability to respond to changes in usage. We also specify durable materials that require less maintenance and are great candidates for remanufacture at end of life. We also challenged the market to think outside the box, and we communicated that intention to reuse the structures in different environments. Celebration Square is a large open area adjacent to City Hall that's home to a myriad events in more settled times. Because of the usage change in the square, it changes frequently and seasonally. So staff decided that instead of a traditional brick and mortar changing room facility, because we have a little paddle pool there, they would go to market for change rooms made out of reclaimed shipping containers. The shipping container was removed from the waste stream, and the city was able to improve customer service by providing the additional facilities and able to move the change rooms to wherever they're needed and to remove them completely in colder months. This has been a success that this has been such a success that we recently went to market for shipping container washrooms as a pilot project to also trial in our parks. And an exciting recent development has been the efforts to reclaim building materials when completing demolition of city facilities. The contractor worked with our contract manager to determine which materials would be the best candidates for salvage. And the target materials were set aside and will be going to auction with the funds that are generated going back to the city's budget. This is something we've done for years on things like heritage projects. Heritage structures often have unique fittings and finishings that we always retain and reuse in reconstruction and conservation efforts because it's always been easier. So we're not reinventing the wheel, we're just looking at what has worked before and we're giving it a broader reach. Next slide. I hope that you can see from these examples that circular procurement doesn't have to be massive or complex. You can start small on a procurement with very little risk. Every circular procurement is a win. And sometimes if we don't succeed today, that doesn't mean that next year or in 3 years that we won't be able to. Build up the little wins. Do a pilot, or just look at what you're already doing that's circular and point it out to your buyers and your clients. People want to do the right thing, and showing them that it's possible and they're already doing it is a huge win. Next slide, please. So that's a peek into how we integrate circularity into purchases, but what happens to all the assets that we purchased years ago and are now at end of life? In 2019, the city enacted the Disposal of Surplus Assets policy, which formally commits us to continuously improve the social and environmental impacts of disposal of city-owned items in a transparent and accountable way that balances fiscal responsibility with environmental stewardship. Next slide. From this policy, the surplus assets solution was born. A multidisciplinary project team worked to create a devoted internal site to build on the how of the policy. The site guides users through the process of disposing assets through pictographic explanations and in an accompanying user guide. The site starts off with an overview of the process and how to determine which of the 12 categories the asset fits into and which disposal option is the best fit. Users are guided to an online form where they enter all relevant data, including but not limited to asset condition, the current market value, photos of the asset, and the disposal option that was chosen. The user then submits the form. The current market value determines the level of authority required to approve the disposal. The thresholds align with the purchasing bylaw. This ensures that high-value assets are approved by an appropriate agent before the process is completed and builds in accountability. Users are supported by me and my colleague in waste management, who is a wizard at diverting assets from landfills wherever she can. The information captured on the form for reporting on various data points also provides a clear picture of how and why staff are disposing of certain assets. Reporting also allows us to be transparent and provides excellent documentation in the event of an audit. Next slide, please. In each category, assets are classified by two conditions: good or like new, or poor condition or unusable. For good or like new assets, there is a hierarchy to disposal. The first option is internal reuse. Staff can post their asset on what is essentially an internal marketplace, think like a Mississauga Kijiji. Before making a purchase, other business units can check that board to see if what they need is something that's already on offer. The asset is then transferred between the business units at zero cost. If an item is not a suitable candidate for internal reuse, it can be sold at auction. The city went to market for auctioneer services and have a standing citywide contract. Staff may contact the auction house to pick up items to be put up for sale. Proceeds of that sale are then transferred to the business unit that originally purchased the asset, which avoids waste and saves money. If sales not feasible, items can be donated. We require that the mandate or mission of the group be aligned with the services provided by the city. The group must be a nonprofit or community group. The group must pick up the assets at their own expense. The asset will be used as part of the group services, and the group need to sign a waiver that was developed by our legal department. The Surplus Asset Solution site includes links to verified groups in our areas, making it easier for people to make decisions. This is one of the main ways that we integrate social value into our circular activities. For example, at the beginning of the pandemic, the city was able to donate obsolete laptops to local school boards to support students learning from home who did not have access to a computer. The final option we have is to return the asset to the vendor through a buyback or trade-in program. Staff are directed to speak to their buyer to review the terms and conditions of their assets to determine if this is a possibility. Next slide, please. For those items that cannot be reused, sold, or donated, the only option is waste. Staff are directed to process the waste depending on the category that it falls into. For example, electronic waste requires working with the IT department under their disposal agreements. Large appliances require staff to contact waste management, and other items have instruction for disassembly to remove, recycle, and scrap materials. We classify recycling as waste for the purpose of surplus assets. Final slide, please. So while it may not be simple or quick to implement a program like Surplus Asset Solutions, we didn't accomplish it in a day or a month. Circular procurement is a big topic that touches many aspects of what we do from start to end of life, and more information becomes available on what seems like a daily basis. Sustainability in general is a dynamic and exciting field that provides us a clear path to a hopeful future. This is why we're committed to trying new things, learning from those that work and those that don't, and continuously improving how we pursue a circular approach. Changing minds to make purchases based on what appears to be the lowest cost in the broader public sector is nothing short of revolutionary. That means it will take time and all of our best efforts to learn what is possible and to share that knowledge with others. Try integrating it into one procurement, then another, and another. Keep trying until integration is just part of your day-to-day and understood to be expected and valuable. Educate yourself and your colleagues until wasteful options never seem like they make sense. Those of us in public procurement and asset management work hard to mitigate risk in every purchase. Circular and sustainable procurement are tools that we can use to mitigate risk in the natural and social realms without compromising on quality, delivery, or budget. Between us, we control hundreds of millions of dollars and how those dollars are spent. So let's spend them on purchases that pay us back. Thank you.